Well, I'm sure we've all heard the saying, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. This is an Onkyo TX-440 solid-state stereo receiver from the mid to late 1970s. This is that very same stereo receiver pictured online. You can see that it's listed as being used, but in good working condition, tested with small scrapes, scratches, and lubricated. You can see that all the pictures do show that this is in fact a working receiver, or at least what would lead you to believe that this is a working receiver. And scrolling down goes ahead and just reiterates what we've already read. I don't know why this computer is acting stupid and not scrolling the page. Led me to believe that this was a relatively well cared for and working receiver. And unfortunately that was not the case with this receiver when I just received it not too long ago. There's the box right there. And you can see that it was very decently packaged. It was inside this miniature sort of box. If I can get this open on camera with one hand. There was plenty of packaging material and insulation to prevent it from getting suffering a bunch of problems that were not mentioned in that original listing. The first and most notable problem will be plain to see once we power this on. I don't think that those lights are supposed to be flickering like that. All the lights in this dial assembly are flickering back and forth, although it's most not noticeable on the tuning and signal indicators. And it's not supposed to be flickering like that. And you might be able to hear the faint sound of interference. That is what this noise right here is all that's able to be received when it's exhibiting this behavior. And if you leave this receiver on for a good 3 or 4 minutes and it warms up, the flickering goes away. I think it actually just did it right now. It just went away. And you can see now that it's gotten a bit brighter. It stopped flickering. And now if I turn the volume control up, it's playing music. So the problem lies within, I believe, the filter capacitors, which are inside this receiver. And it looks to be working relatively okay right now. This is your power switch / speaker setting. You can change and alternate between listening to audio both through headphones and speakers, just speakers, speakers A, B, or C, or any combination thereof. You also have a bass control, treble control, volume / balance. The center ring controls the balance, which is very useful. You have a low and a high cut filter, useful for filtering out excessive rumbling or even high-end frequencies. I know there's one radio station around here that processes their bass frequencies way too much, and listening on any sort of pair of respectable, decent speakers, you get blown away because there's way too much bass in the audio. Then you have loudness control on and off, an FM, or rather just a mono or stereo switch, which I believe also works with its line level and phono inputs. Tape monitor 1 and 2. This can support up to 2 different cassette decks, and FM muting. You have a 1/4-inch microphone jack here, so if you want to be a DJ for a day and announce your songs that you're playing throughout your house, you can do so. And then you have this selector switch here for alternating between AM, FM, FM stereo, phono, and aux. So this has a total of 3 line level inputs, 1 phono input, magnetic of course. And I'm not too sure what's going on with this receiver, but in addition to that flickering issue, I suspect that whoever refurbished this receiver really didn't know what they were doing. I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, because it's certainly beyond the scope of my knowledge to attempt to refurbish one of these if it were in complete unworking condition. But if I turn the volume up now, change that to something a bit better. You can hear that both speakers are getting audio, but if I engage the FM muting, you lose all audio. And if you turn up the volume all the way, you can faintly hear it. So the FM muting circuit is obviously out of alignment or out of calibration, such that it mutes all audio regardless of whether it's receiving a strong signal or not. In addition to that, there's a stereo indicator light here, right here, which will illuminate if you're receiving a stereo signal, but that is not the case on this receiver. And this receiver, as it stands right now, is incapable of receiving stereo signals, even very strong ones. And go figure, this handycam went dead yet again. So in addition to the FM muting not functioning as it should, this is also incapable of receiving stereo in any form whatsoever. Even on the strongest signals that I know for a fact it is capable of receiving in stereo, it just won't do it, because something is wrong with the MPX decoder in here, which will decode the stereo signal. And a lot of people online have contributed a malfunctioning MPX decoder to also causing issues with the FM muting circuit, which would make sense because it's not detecting that it's receiving a strong enough signal to be in stereo, and therefore it thinks it's not a very strong signal regardless. So then it mutes the audio for every single frequency on the dial, even if it's strong. So with that disengaged, we can use this to listen to radio. That does sound relatively good. The classical station sounds exceptional on here, but of course it's only in mono because you can't. It cannot receive stereo right now. So we'll go ahead and do a quick dial scan here.
Full of desire.
Yards to touch.
So this is set to FM audio. It should be capable of receiving a stereo signal. I've gone ahead and connected up a 75 ohm to 300 ohm FM antenna to this receiver, which I have running along the floor here, and it's connected over there. And even with an external antenna, it still cannot receive any semblance of FM stereo. On the rear of the unit, we're presented with sundry connections and connectors. Starting from the right, we have a total of two 300 watt AC outlets. One is switched and one is unswitched, but they're not polarized, so if you have newer audio equipment that has polarized plugs, you'll have to use some sort of an adapter because it just won't fit in here. It does have a fuse, and the original fuse is still good. You have your different speaker connections. As mentioned before, this can support up to a maximum of 3 pairs of speakers for left and right stereo audio. And I'm not all too sure if you can run them all simultaneously. I do know that you can run, I believe, 2 speaker pairs at once and alternate between A and B speaker, A and C, C and A. So you can see right here, made in Japan by Onkyo. It says 80 watts. This is a 20 watts per channel receiver, so certainly not a massive beast when it comes to output power, but decent enough to get good quality sound if it had been working. We have a ground lug here for attaching ground wire, which is useful for mitigating ground loop issues and that sort of thing. We have an external FM antenna connections, an AM antenna connection, 300 ohm and 75 ohm FM antenna connections, which I actually have this balun attached to, and then from there it runs into this coaxial, F-type coaxial cable into another rabbit ear style TV antenna, which I'm just using as a crude FM antenna right now. Have phono inputs here, an aux-in line level input, tape deck 2 input and outputs, and tape deck 1 input and output, but I don't know why they've gone ahead and capped off the tape deck 1 inputs with these RCA pins. I'm not really sure what the purpose of this is, what purpose they serve. It could be that they're disabled, or I think it's just to cap them off. I'm not all too sure. I'll have to look into that and see if they even work. And then you also do have a DIN type connector if you have a device that supports that connection. There are a total of 4 screws, 2 on each side, which I've removed, and they have these little metal pieces that help to sort of cut into the wood and keep it nice and secure and snug. And after removing all 4 of those, you can simply remove the top cover like so. We'll put this to the side down here and get a look at the internal components. And this does use 2 STK-032 power amplifier chips. The right speaker fuse looks to be original. The left one looks to have been replaced at some point in time by the previous owners. The tuning capacitor is over here. And we do have an actual metal flywheel, so if you want to spin up and down the dial rather quickly, it's very easy to do. You just kind of spin it and it'll go all the way to the end. Now this right here is actually the wires which supply the voltage for the very small dial pointer light, which was not replaced by whoever sold this to me, even though they claimed all the bulbs were replaced, because looking online, the indicator for the needle is supposed to illuminate. You can see something that looks like duct tape here. I don't know if that's original to the receiver. And then in addition to having this circuit board here, there's one located below it, kind of tucked in there. And I did have a brief look in here for the trimmer capacitor responsible for adjusting the FM muting, but I can't seem to find it. You've got this big rectangular one here that sticks up out of the board. You have two over here and two over here, and that's pretty much all that I can see. Kind of a letdown too. The ferrite rod antenna is nothing to write home about. It's actually pretty small. I would think that they'd at least make that quite a bit larger, seeing as how this is so heavy and big. Go ahead and turn this on now. And what did I do, because I don't hear any audio now coming through? Oh, that's why FM muting was on again. This station has the worst sounding audio I've ever heard for an FM station. They're using what sounds to be 128K or maybe 192K MP3s. They compress the audio to where it's beyond brick wall limited. It has no semblance of dynamic range.
I'm working on a long-term plan, gonna be your man.
I don't know if you can pick up on that, but there is a heavy amount of MP3 artifacting in their audio. I refuse to listen to that station. Believe me when I say it, it probably sounds a lot better on camera than it does in real life. It sounds like their entire collection is comprised of dubious quality YouTube uploads of country music, because the quality is just abhorrent. You can see as we tune in here, the tuning indicator and the signal indicators do work. I actually had an issue when I first got this. I powered this on, and you know how when you power it on, it makes that sizzling sound. That sound? Well, it almost burned out that speaker over there because I had it turned up so loud because FM muting was on. I disengaged FM muting, and I got blown away across the room with that distortion sound. So, you can see. Okay, now I left it off for a good moment. You could hear that distortion. Yeah, I had this turned all the way up to an excessive volume. That's a great way to burn out speakers, let me tell you. And also probably scare yourself into the next century. Thankfully the tuning dial assembly is actually working in relative alignment. So to try to... Now I turn this off, so now I have to wait a good 10 minutes for this to warm up again. Hopefully it won't take all that long. Maybe you can hear that sizzling noise. It sounds like somebody's cooking some bacon right now. It's coming from right over in this area. Yeah, coming from right over here, I could tell. You can see it's not picking up much of anything because it's having issues with the filter capacitors right now. Those are the culprits for the majority of the problems that are plaguing this receiver. So once this gets to warming up, hopefully it doesn't take the next century to do so, I'll be able to test a little bit more of the AM reception and also devices that are connected to its line level input. Of course it's RCA, but I have an RCA to 3.5mm cable because this will be connected to an iPod's FM radio adapter, since of course this is incapable of receiving FM and stereo now. Okay, I just switched this over to phono. You can hear that noise again. It's music you don't hear on the AM radio anymore. In addition to giving you a better look at how the receiver looks illuminated at night, I've shut and extinguished all of the lights because they're LEDs and they were causing quite a bit of interference on AM. I thought that LEDs got rid of most of the interference that plagued CFLs. I guess not. That's a fairly decent AM receiver. This receiver has actually pretty decent wideband audio fidelity on AM.
Super Bowl the year before was weak.
以前會發明星夢，企喺別人嘅眼中。
I'm loved, and that's what Christianity is all about. Additional candidates. I think the candidates we have are really putting forward the issues, putting forward very bold solutions.
The mayor also says he can't fully commit to Hillary Clinton right now either until he sees more of her vision for the country. Wins News Time, 10:25.
Sleepy's extended Labor Day holiday prices are unbeatable. Get up to half off nearly every mattress in the store.
Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. I have this ancient iPod, I think it's an iPod Video Classic, something or other, with the old, remember when they didn't have the ability to tune in to FM radio signals on their own, and you had to buy this accessory? Well, I have one that's connected up right now, and hopefully this will allow us to listen to FM radio in stereo running through this receiver's aux input.
So no, honey, I'm good. I can have another, but I probably should not. I got somebody at home, and if I stay, I might not leave alone. No, honey, I'm good. I can have another, but I probably should not. I got
now, RDS isn't keeping up properly.
Great selection and great big savings you receive when you buy a new Nissan. Here's how the Power of 3 can help you. We have 3 massive and easily accessible locations, and with over 5,000 Nissans to choose from, we have the car you want at the best price. We buy and sell and buy them, and the more we buy, the more we sell, the more you save. Like
what do you mean by language of prayer?
Like, to me, a perfect song. I mean, let's look at a perfect song. What is it? Because there are great songs, but there are very few perfect songs.
Pick a Cohen perfect song. That's what we're talking about.
Well, Bird on the Wire is a perfect song.
And still those voices are calling from far away.
You can see I just have this connected into the aux in, and then from there it goes into the iPod's radio adapter. So unfortunately, even though this stereo receiver certainly has nice looks and decent features and a great amount of audio inputs, well, I can't quite justify keeping it because it doesn't work properly, and every time you turn it on and off, you have to deal with these flickering flights of fancy, as well as the distorted audio and the inability to receive FM stereo broadcasts. So unfortunately, this is going to be getting returned and shipped back to the seller very shortly because I just can't justify keeping something that I paid for, thinking that I was getting something that was restored and working, when in reality it's anything but. I think all they did was really just replace the bulbs and say that they fixed everything. And this knob just came off, doesn't want to stay on there. So unfortunately that's going to be it for this Onkyo TX-440 stereo receiver from the 1970s. Well, I thought I would go ahead and record this update video because if you notice, not only are we receiving FM radio, but it's in stereo. Well, I did some research last night after concluding the recording of that video and noticed that quite a few other people who have these vintage stereo receivers have also run into the same problem of having that sizzling sound accompanied by flickering lights. And it turns out that it's a common problem that ails these speaker/power switches, and the contacts get worn out, and that causes electricity to arc between the contacts of the switch, which causes that sizzling sound I was hearing and the flickering lights. And so the ways you can go about fixing this is to replace the whole switch, disassemble a switch and clean up the contacts as best as you can, or try to use contact cleaner. But if you jiggle a switch just enough and leave it on, it usually resolves itself. It seems to be getting a bit better as I'm using it, probably because whatever grime and corrosion was in there is starting to get worn off from my using this. I was also able to resolve the inability to receive FM stereo and also the issue with FM muting. And I would have never figured out how to fix this had it not been for the service manual that was posted online. I was able to use that, and I have a little guideline here, about 2 or 3 charts showing you how to calibrate the receiver. And right here you could see step number 16 shows you how to go about adjusting the FM muting using a variable resistor. So if we scroll up here, this resistor right here, R713, was responsible for the FM muting circuit. And so what I realized was that somebody had turned it to its most aggressive setting, so it muted every signal, and that also wreaked havoc with the FM stereo detector. Because it wasn't thinking it was getting a strong enough signal, it wasn't switching over to FM stereo. So I just went ahead and adjusted it until strong radio stations began to get through, but yet when you detune the signal, you would just hear silence because the FM muting circuit was working perfectly. So somebody obviously did not know what they were doing when they were adjusting the FM muting circuit. Now that I've gone ahead and done that, it works fine. The FM stereo light does work. I can receive FM stereo broadcast now, and let me tell you, this receiver sounds amazing. So now I have a working stereo receiver, and best of all, after contacting the seller and informing him of the various issues that were wrong with this receiver, he decided to issue me a partial refund because the cost for me to ship it back to him would probably end up costing more or very close to what I paid originally for this stereo receiver. It's close to £30, so it goes without saying.